First was to improve the living conditions, improving salaries. We did also laws in order to for their progress in career in a way that the promotions cannot be politicized but based on the merits. Another issues are related to development of infrastructures.
But in Baucau, the local police superintendent says equipment shortages remain a serious issue. Police communicate using their phones instead of walkie-talkies, and a shortage of vehicles means some emergencies can only be attended to on foot.
We still face some challenges, some problem like communication, transportation, and infrastructure, as well as and then also some office material, because without the support of the material, it will be very hard for police to perform the task.
Each part of the law to the situation. Okay.
The UN Police Commissioner in East Timor says reform takes time. Foreign police contingents and the UN will continue to train for years to come in institutions like the National Police Academy.
To build a police force, it takes at least one generation. And we believe that what was done so far and what it will be done until UN one day will leave, it will provide our Timorese counterparts, Polícia Nacional Timor-Leste, with the proper tools to answer to any type of incident.
But the triggers for instability are overwhelming. East Timor's population is rapidly rising, placing pressure on the country's land and housing.
But I think both as the population grows and as some of the strains on that population grow over time, it will be important for the police to increase their ability to be seen as a responder to local problems, to be able to filter things through the justice system and produce results.
Unemployment is a growing problem in East Timor, particularly amongst the youth. 40% of the population here live below the poverty line, and social divisions which caused violence in the past still exist. Osvaldo is jobless, but lives with relatives. He says the frustrations created by unemployment are real security concerns.
Most of the youth and people my age have no job. It's very easy for them to commit crimes, get involved in gangs, and create conflicts and more problems. Bad things happen because of no jobs.
But good things happen too. It's enrolment time, and 20,000 young Timorese filter into the police academy to apply to become a recruit. Standards are high. Only 250 will be accepted, joining the ranks of men like Commander Da Costa. But East Timor will need the best if it's to face the challenge of going it alone.
That report from Drew Ambrose. For more on the issue of national security in East Timor, we're here in the capital, Dili. Joining us on the panel, Jose Antonio Bello is a veteran journalist and director of Tempo Seminar, a Dili-based newspaper. Professor Damien Kingsbury heads the School of International and Political Studies at Deakin University, Australia. And rounding off the panel is Francisco Guterres, East Timor's Secretary of State for Security. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being with us this morning. Mr. Guterres, if I could start with you. The UN police have been handing over policing matters and responsibilities to the local police now over the last year or so. How confident are you that East Timor's police can take over national security?
First of all, I'd like to thank that the UN has done a great job in Timor. We see that there are a lot of improvement in the police. From our side, the government also, when we took the office in 2007, we started a reform into the police institution. So we're quite a little bit confident in that at this stage that once the UN leave in 2012, Timorese police will take over the responsibility, and then I'm quite sure there will be no major crisis afterwards.
Damien Kingsbury, are you just as confident?
I have more reservations. I think we've got to go back to the basics, and that is that when Timor-Leste became independent, there was an aspiration that it would leave behind the authoritarianism of the Indonesian period, and in many respects the police are continuing to replicate the models that were here in the mid-90s. They were trained by the Indonesians. Many of the police are those who were employed by the Indonesians, and many of the practices continue to reflect the Indonesian era: corruption, business activities, brutality, unaccountability. So whilst there are improvements, I don't think they're quite there yet.
Jose Bello, how much confidence does the East Timorese people, or do the East Timorese people have in their own police force?
For me, as a Timorese, we have to be optimistic.
Being optimistic is one thing. Are they confident that the police force will be able to take over national security?
Well, the police force is still weak and fragile, and it still needs more help. But the UN has failed to help this Timorese police force to be moving as professional as it is.
In what way? How?
Well, the UN police, you can see on the street here, they're just driving their big bank cars, just driving like mad. And they are not really helping the Timorese police up in the districts.
Francisco Gutierrez, it doesn't sound like the local police will be able to take over at all.
I think many of the internationals are looking at the situation before 2006. They didn't really look at what we are doing right now. They don't want to understand what we are doing right now. To be honest, I agree with Zebello that, to be honest, since 2006 up until now, we see there are a lot of improvement, and then UN is doing nothing. I always say to many people about the UN is only fast in doing report. But in terms of action, they are doing nothing.
What do you mean by doing nothing? What can they do? What should have they been doing in the last 10 years?
You can look at that in the village, in the sub-district. There is no UN police over there. There are only police officers working in the sub-district. I don't really agree that with James as well, saying that, well, the police is really corrupt. It's not. Now you are building, we are start building. You can't compare a police of 8 years old with a police in New York in Australia. It's something different. They took 200 years to build this police to become a good one.
Damien Kingsbury, do you think the UN has failed in terms of trying to get East Timor's police up to scratch?
The UN has drawn from a very wide base, and many of the police that they've brought here have themselves not been at the top of the level of performance. There's no doubt about that. But there's also a cultural issue, and I don't mean Timorese culture, I mean the culture of the police force, which continues from the Indonesian period. It continued up until 2006. And whilst the Timorese police force, the PNTL, has been rebuilt since 2006, it continues to have elements of that culture in it, which are very, very difficult to resolve and to overcome. I think the real question is, yes, the UN hasn't done a great job. There are limits to what it could achieve. The question is what sort of program will go forward into the future to assist the PNTL to become even better.
Francisco Gutierrez, what do you think that program should be?
You have to provide them a future into the institution itself, the police. We come up with we call it the promotion regime, career regime. The career regime provides them a future into the PNTL. From that, you can motivate them to start working professionally. So I think this is something we're going very slow, but gradual.
Jose Bello, is this a question of training or is this a question of resources?
Well, it's a matter of mix actually. Yeah, it's from the beginning the setup itself, it has been wrong setup, and it's becoming like this. We have to deal with this kind of problem. The chain command of the PNTL is still weak. FFTTL, the external security defense, are strong enough because of the chain command is strong.
Is it then fair to ask the foreign forces to leave in 2012? It really doesn't sound like East Timor's National Police can take on security at all. Damien.
Can I just say that I respect the improvements and the reforms that the government's been making. They have been making a real effort, and they have been recognising and tackling the problem, and I think we should recognise that and acknowledge that. And the UN has failed, and it hasn't done an adequate job. The question is how do we transition forward beyond 2012? Is the answer to cut out training entirely, external training, or is the answer to have a graduated process or a slower drawdown or perhaps a smaller training force here, but a more highly skilled force, somebody who can do their job better, I think, than has been done in the past.
Francisco, would you agree with that?
We're now preparing the transition of the UN until 2012 at the end. So in 2011 March, we will take over. At least we call it the handover, the full handover. From that on, and we start at we call it five main programs with the UN. First one is about legislation. We have to prepare everything, legal basis for the police. So in terms of legal basis on accountability and everything about the rules of engagement and everything, you have to prepare
That all
everything.
looks very good on paper though, but in the past and from experience, we've seen gang warfare on the streets, we've seen the police and the military clashing with each other, we've seen rifts within the military, within the police itself. Is this really a force that's able, that we can trust to take on the national security?
No, because if you look at the past, if you go in deep a little bit into the past, what's happening is even the setup the police without all the attributes with the police, without any necessary accessories, without laws, without regulations, without proper training. Now we are revising that.
Jose Bello, are you just as confident that if regulation, if rules are set down, that the police will set aside their rifts, that they will be able to take over national security?
We are a billion institution. As a human being, it has to be complete. We can't only build we can only have a leg and a head, no stomach. It's not a human being. So a police force for us is needed, and it has to be strong enough. Otherwise, this country is going to be run by the gangs.
We've been talking a lot about the police and about the National Security Force, but let's talk about the judicial system here in East Timor as well. Damien, if I could throw this question to you, how confident are you of this country's judicial system? Is it strong?
The judicial system is improving, like the police force. It's an improving institution, but it is still fundamentally weak. There are still too few judges, too few lawyers. The language issue is terribly complicated. We find, for example, in Balcão, if you have a trial, the judge will speak Portuguese. It will be the evidence will be translated into Teton and then into a local language. So you have 3 layers of language just in the evidence system. And of course, there's no real rules about interpretation. So what happens is you find that interpreters actually start to embellish or change or modify evidence. So the judicial system suffers there. It is building, it is getting better and stronger. The other problem, of course, is that there is still an element of a culture of impunity